Luxury dinner celebration took a dark turn when my best friend stood up and announced I was buying everyone's $15,000 bill. When I refused, she smashed a wine glass and shrieked, "You're rich, you owe us!" The restaurant staff blocked the exit as the manager smiled. "We already charged your card." I pulled out my phone and said, "Time to call the fraud department." I always considered myself a generous person. Over the years, I treated friends to meals, covered tabs when someone was short, and even funded a few group trips. But nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded during what was supposed to be a celebratory evening in New York City. It was a crisp autumn evening when my best friend, Sarah, invited me to a luxurious dinner to celebrate her recent promotion. She had chosen Le Bernardin, a renowned seafood restaurant in Manhattan, known for its exquisite dishes and elegant ambience. The restaurant offered a 4-course prix fixe dinner for $210 per person, and with wine pairings and additional courses, the bill could easily escalate. I was aware of the restaurant's reputation and its pricing, but I assumed we were all paying our own way. As I arrived at Le Bernardin, the warm lighting and sophisticated decor set the tone for an unforgettable evening. The group was already seated, a mix of close friends and acquaintances, all dressed to the nines. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and clinking glasses. We indulged in the chef's tasting menu, a 10-course culinary journey that showcased the finest seafood delicacies. Each dish was a masterpiece, from the delicate pounded tuna with foie gras to the perfectly cooked Dover sole. The sommelier presented wine pairings that complemented each course, enhancing the flavors and elevating the experience. As the evening progressed, I noticed Sarah becoming increasingly animated. She was ordering additional bottles of rare wines, encouraging everyone to indulge without restraint. While I appreciated her enthusiasm, a nagging feeling began to creep in. The lavishness seemed excessive, even for a celebration. When the final course was served, Sarah stood up, tapping her glass to get everyone's attention. With a beaming smile, she announced, "I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. This has been an incredible celebration. And a special thanks to my name for generously offering to cover the entire bill." A stunned silence fell over the table. My heart raced as all eyes turned to me. I managed to stammer, "I'm sorry, but I wasn't aware of this arrangement. I can't cover the whole bill." Sarah's expression darkened. She slammed her wine glass onto the table, shattering it, and shrieked, "You're rich! You owe us!" The restaurant staff quickly approached, attempting to defuse the situation. The manager, a composed gentleman, stepped forward and said, "Sir, we've already charged your card for the full amount." Panic set in. I hadn't authorized such a charge, and the amount was astronomical. I pulled out my phone and said, "I need to call my credit card's fraud department immediately." The manager's demeanor shifted slightly, maintaining professionalism but with a hint of firmness. "Sir, we can discuss this matter privately. Please follow me to the office." I followed him, leaving the murmuring group behind. In the office, I explained the situation to the manager, emphasizing that I had not authorized the charge. He listened attentively and then said, "I understand your concern. However, Miss Sarah informed us that you would be covering the bill. Given the nature of our establishment, we proceeded based on her assurance." I replied, "I was not consulted about this arrangement. This is unauthorized, and I need the charge reversed immediately." The manager nodded. "We will initiate an internal review. In the meantime, please contact your credit card company to dispute the charge." I immediately called my credit card issuer, explaining the unauthorized charge. They assured me that under the Fair Credit Billing Act, I was protected against unauthorized charges and that they would investigate the matter. They also advised me to file a police report, given the fraudulent nature of the incident. The following day, I visited the local police precinct to file a report. The officers took my statement and informed me that they would look into the matter. They also mentioned that such incidents, while uncommon, were taken seriously, especially involving significant amounts. In the days that followed, I attempted to reach out to Sarah to understand her actions. She was unresponsive, and mutual friends were equally baffled by her behavior. It became evident that our friendship had taken an irreparable hit. Weeks later, I received confirmation from my credit card company that the charge had been reversed, and my account was credited accordingly. The ordeal was a stark reminder of the importance of clear communication and the potential pitfalls of assumptions, even among close friends. Reflecting on the incident, I realized the value of setting boundaries and the necessity of discussing financial expectations openly. While generosity is a virtue, it should never be exploited or assumed. This experience, though painful, imparted lessons that I carry with me, ensuring that such a situation never arises again. After the credit card company reversed the charge and I filed the police report, I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got a knock at my apartment door. It was early evening, and I was home alone. When I opened it, there was a guy standing there in a black leather jacket, holding a manila envelope. He didn't say much, just handed me the envelope and said, "You've been served." Then he turned around and left. Inside the envelope? A civil lawsuit. Sarah was suing me for emotional distress and defamation. I stared at the papers in disbelief. She was claiming I publicly humiliated her by refusing to pay the bill and that my actions had ruined her reputation among her coworkers, some of whom had been at the dinner. She wanted $75,000 in damages. I couldn't believe it. She lied to the restaurant, charged my card without permission, screamed at me in public, and I was being sued? I immediately called my lawyer, Alan, who's a solid, no-nonsense guy I've worked with a few times on business matters. I sent him the documents, and he was just as stunned. "She's got no case," he told me. "But she's banking on you settling just to avoid the hassle." No way. I wasn't going to let this slide. A week later, while prepping our response to the lawsuit, Alan told me something weird. He dug a little into Sarah's background, and it turned out this wasn't her first time pulling something shady. A couple years back, she'd been part of a lawsuit involving a former roommate. Same story, extravagant lifestyle, then suddenly accusing someone else of theft and emotional abuse when things didn't go her way. She'd lost that case. Armed with that info, we went ahead and filed a counterclaim for fraud, misuse of identity, and unauthorized financial transactions. We also subpoenaed the restaurant for video footage of the night, which they agreed to release once the paperwork was in order. About 3 weeks later, I got a call from one of the other dinner guests, Max. We hadn't talked much since the night of the dinner, but he sounded nervous. He told me that Sarah had contacted several people who were at the dinner and suggested they give statements that I had offered to pay in advance. Max said it didn't sit right with him, and he didn't want to be involved in something shady. I thanked him and asked if he'd be willing to give a statement about what really happened. He agreed. That was the first real crack in her story. A week after that, another guest, Nina, reached out. She told me Sarah had promised to take care of everything before the dinner. Nina thought that meant Sarah had planned to pay. She had no idea Sarah planned to dump it on me. Piece by piece, Sarah's whole narrative started falling apart. And then something happened that almost made me laugh, if I wasn't so pissed off. The manager from Le Bernardin reached out through my lawyer. Turns out Sarah had put down her own card for the reservation, standard policy for large parties. But here's the twist. Apparently, right before dessert, she got up and whispered something to the manager about switching the charge to my card. She even waved him over to me and pointed while I was laughing at a joke someone made. I never even noticed it. She had planned the whole thing. Right down to the moment she could claim I agreed. At this point, my lawyer added attempted credit card fraud to the counterclaim. It was getting serious. Then came the pressure. Sarah started texting me. First, casual stuff, like, "Hey, maybe we can just talk?" Then it got weirder. She said she missed having me as a friend, that she never wanted it to get this far. Finally, when I didn't answer, the guilt-tripping started. "You know I'm struggling. You're doing well. You could have just helped instead of humiliating me." I didn't respond. Not one word. I just kept forwarding everything to my lawyer. The mediation hearing was scheduled for the following month. And just when I thought the drama couldn't get worse, something else dropped. She'd started a GoFundMe to fight injustice in her life. She claimed she was the victim of financial bullying by a wealthy ex-friend who weaponized money to destroy her. She didn't name me, but it wasn't hard to figure out who she meant. She raised over $8,000 in 3 days. A few mutual friends even chipped in. At that point, I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling furious. She wasn't just lying, she was profiting from it. I knew what I had to do. I had to dig deeper. If she was doing this to me, who else had she pulled it on? That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. Alan agreed it was a smart move, especially if we were looking to show a pattern of behavior in court. 3 days into the investigation, the PI found something. Sarah had opened credit cards under her ex-boyfriend's name 2 years ago. He'd filed a police report, but the case was dropped when he moved out of state. The PI also found that Sarah had multiple eviction filings in her past, all tied to unpaid rent and fake checks. She was a walking disaster. And she was using charm, manipulation, and guilt to rope people into her messes. I was done playing nice. The private investigator kept digging. A week after I gave the green light, he came back with something that honestly made my stomach drop. Sarah was being investigated by her own company. Apparently, someone from HR had been anonymously tipped off about questionable conduct during off-hours client dinners. A few employees, one of whom was at that luxury dinner, had already been interviewed. The company had strict ethics rules around expensing client meals, and using personal relationships to influence contracts. Sarah had been skirting that line hard. What we learned was this: the dinner at Le Bernardin. It wasn't just a personal celebration. She had invited a few people under the pretense that it was a networking opportunity. And now it looked like she had tried to pass it off as a work expense. That explained a lot. Her desperation. Her sudden push to make me look like the bad guy. If I'd refused in private, it wouldn't have mattered. But because I refused publicly, in front of potential business contacts and colleagues, her plan fell apart. She needed me to look like the villain, like I'd backed out of a promise, so she could still salvage her story to her boss. She wasn't just trying to use my wallet. She was trying to save her job. My lawyer and I were floored. This twisted everything. We updated our counterclaim with this info, plus a formal affidavit from the PI. At that point, we had Sarah on false pretenses, attempted fraud, and potentially workplace misconduct. She was unraveling. Then came the biggest twist. I got an email. From her fiancé. I didn't even know she was engaged. His name was Dylan, and the email was short. He said he didn't know who else to talk to, and he wanted to know if I was the friend from the dinner. He said Sarah had told him a completely different version of the story, that I had offered to pay as a gift, and then humiliated her in front of everyone by backing out. But he didn't buy it anymore. He'd found some texts on her iPad that didn't match her story. She'd messaged another friend before the dinner saying, "Don't worry about the bill, I'm pinning it on me, he can afford it lol." Another one said, "Gonna milk this one last time." Dylan told me he was sorry. That he felt sick about all of it. And then he asked me something I didn't expect. He asked if I talked to his lawyer. Turns out, Dylan had been lending Sarah money, thousands over the past year. She told him it was for a down payment on a condo, but there was no condo. And now he was considering pressing charges too. This was spiraling into something way bigger than I imagined. A civil suit turned into multiple legal claims, financial fraud, a corporate ethics probe, and now a betrayed fiancé ready to go nuclear. I wasn't celebrating though. Part of me felt drained. All of this started because I showed up to a dinner thinking I was supporting a friend. Instead, I walked into an ambush by someone who had been planning the betrayal for weeks. Maybe longer. The last straw came when I found out she'd contacted my job. I work in finance, nothing flashy, but stability matters. Sarah called my HR anonymously, twice, saying I was being investigated for fraud, hoping they'd catch wind of my lawsuit and panic. But I had already told my manager what happened, and thankfully they stood by me. Still, she was trying to ruin my life, every angle she could. My lawyer said we had enough to push for criminal charges if we wanted. But I still hadn't decided. And as the mediation date approached, my phone buzzed again. A blocked number. No voicemail this time. The day of the mediation hearing arrived. I showed up early, dressed sharp but not flashy, sitting in the bland beige conference room with my lawyer, Alan. Across the table sat Sarah and her lawyer, a nervous-looking young guy who clearly didn't expect the kind of mess he was walking into. Sarah looked off. Her usual polished confidence was gone. Her hair wasn't done like it used to be, and her face looked tight like she hadn't slept in days. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The mediator, a middle-aged woman named Janice, opened with the usual legal formalities. She asked both sides to summarize their positions. Sarah's lawyer went first. He claimed my refusal to pay was a miscommunication, and that I'd agreed earlier then backed out, publicly embarrassing Sarah and ruining a significant professional opportunity. He tried to make it sound civil. Then Alan calmly slid the manila folder across the table. Inside was everything. Sworn statements from Max and Nina. The restaurant's security footage of Sarah pointing me out to the manager before switching the card. The text from her fiancé. The PI's summary report. Even a transcript of the anonymous complaint to my job, traced back to her IP address. Her lawyer flipped through the pages, his hands shaking slightly. Then he looked at her. "Did you know they had all this?" Sarah didn't speak. She just stared down at the table, silent. That's when Janice spoke up. "Sarah, you've been accused of serious misconduct, and based on the documentation, it appears this was a deliberate act of fraud. Do you want to respond?" Silence. Janice pressed again. "We can take a break if you need a moment." Sarah suddenly stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. But her voice cracked hard when she finally spoke. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." Her lawyer tried to interrupt, but she waved him off and kept going. "I was broke. I was drowning in credit card debt. I was trying to look successful, trying to hold on to this image that I'd built. People around me always seemed to have it figured out, buying condos, getting promoted, going on vacations. I kept thinking if I faked it long enough, maybe it'd become real." She turned to me. You were always the responsible one. The one who had his life together. I knew you'd never agree to pay. That's why I didn't ask. I just assumed you'd cave when it happened. Like before. Like when you helped me with rent last year and said nothing. I stared at her, feeling a weird mix of emotions, anger, pity, confusion. It was the most honest I'd ever seen her, but that didn't undo anything. You used me, I said. My voice was calm, but my throat was dry. Not just once. 4 months. Maybe years. She nodded. Slowly. I know. Alan spoke up, finally. We're prepared to settle if she agrees to a written apology, full withdrawal of her suit, and repayment of the amount my client covered, which was reversed but still cost time and stress. Otherwise, we proceed with filing criminal charges. Her lawyer whispered something to her. She didn't respond. Then she looked at me and said, I'll write the apology. I'll sign whatever. Just don't take this to court. Please. Janice nodded and ended the session. No one shook hands. No one said goodbye. On the way out, Dylan, her ex-fiancé, was standing in the hallway. I hadn't seen him walk in. She paused when she saw him. For a second, I thought he'd yell or walk away. Instead, he just asked, Why? She didn't answer. She just broke down. The tears came fast and heavy. He didn't move to comfort her. Just stood there. Watching the person he once thought he knew crumble in front of him. Then he walked away. Back outside, the city felt loud and real again. Cars honked. People laughed. The world hadn't stopped for my mess. Over the next few weeks, she followed through. The written apology arrived. It was detailed, surprisingly heartfelt, and acknowledged everything. She formally dropped the lawsuit. The GoFundMe disappeared. A few mutual friends sent quiet apologies for believing her. I didn't press charges. Not because I forgave her. But because I was tired. And because sometimes dragging a person through the mud doesn't give you the peace you think it will. My life slowly returned to normal. Work picked back up. I saw friends again. But I was different. Wiser, maybe? Definitely less trusting. I haven't heard from Sarah since. Sometimes I still think about that night. The sound of the glass shattering, the look on her face when I said no, the way everyone froze like time had stopped. I think about how quickly someone you love can twist your kindness into a weapon. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was that she knew who I was, and used it against me. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not the same. And maybe that's the point. Some people walk into your life to teach you something. And then they leave, like storms that tear up everything you thought was solid. I've rebuilt. Stronger, quieter, a little more guarded. Still generous, but only to those who earn it. And that's enough for me.